I'm going to demonstrate the fabrication of a rigid box structure. This will be the exercise for our last project. Normally these are made out of chipboard. So if you look at the sample pack that I gave everybody in class, I have some samples of some chipboard. This is chipboard 2-ply. It's pretty thick. It's about 1/8 of an inch. And I have chipboard single ply, about 60 thousandths, and that's sort of a craft finish. Most of the time that's how it is fabricated, with that kind of material. I also have black 2-ply and single ply. And then of course I have a regular kind of a crescent board. These are the boards that come in multiple colors. It's about 60 thousandths. So the only reason I'm introducing that is because sometimes we see the substrate, the board that's inside, that we are wrapping around, and sometimes we want to pick a color. We might see it, we might want it to be white or black or something like that. So I'm just going to demonstrate how to take advantage of that. So I'm going to build this in a black. In this case, I'm wrapping this in a red, and I'm going to leave the inside of the tray exposed. Like if I had made this out of craft and I don't want to see that, I would probably make a red panel and put that down in there to finish that off. So all these techniques are fine. I'm just going to show this particular one. I have some other tutorials on wrapping structures. Some have magnets in it and lids and a little more complex. This is about as simple as it gets. It's very basic. That's why I want to use this for our exercise, so you guys can get a feel for how it is to wrap a structure like this. So the material I'm using is, this is the black, the single ply, so it's about a 1/16 of an inch. It's very thin. So this is great for a box about this size. If some of your structures get quite a bit larger, the 2-ply can work a little bit better. In rigid box structures, unlike our folding carton and our corrugated, which comes from a die line that we fold up, and we've been working out how to cleverly fold all those pieces up. This is a little bit more of a fabrication technique. I am going to fold this, and these can be cut with die lines, but it's more about building. It's almost like a woodworking technique where we're going to take our panels, cut them into pieces, and then glue them together. This one I'm going to fold these up, and I'll show you how that works. So I'm going to provide the material and the red, the covering material, and the die lines. It's all worked out. So this will be the die line pattern to cut out the box, and it's a little detail here. I have a little step right here, so when we fold the corner up, I have an overlap and not a void in the corner. And I'll show you how that works. So basically the footprint of my box is going to be a 4x4, and then I have this one panel on this side is going to be 4 1/8, because I have 60 thousandths per side, and then this one is going to be exactly 4. So when I fold that up, we'll have the step will be all the same, and it'll be a perfect square. So what I'm doing is, instead of cutting it into separate panels, I'm just going to do a partial score here on the bottom, which means basically cut halfway through the material and just fold it and glue it up. It's just a little easier to do. Instead of trying to line everything up, it makes it easier to glue together. So I would take that and I would use my repositionable spray mount and put it on the board. There is no grain, so it's not like our corrugated board where we have to absolutely line it up. Just do the best you can, get it on center, and then cut out the outline, and then make sure you cut that little tick mark in there, and then we do partial cuts on the inside. So once we do all that, we have the board cut out, and here is an example of that partial cut where it's going halfway through, and I can get a nice fold there. So I've glued up these two corners. It is only 60 thousandths, but overlapping that makes that nice and crisp there. I will have a void in these bottom corners, but when I wrap the paper around this, it'll give us a nice radius at the bottom, so it's all equal. So what I do is, I'm just using regular masking tape, and what I'm going to do is put glue on these two edges. I'm just using Elmer's glue. It works really well with these boards. These two edges, they both go inside, so I'm going to do them at the same time. Just going to smear that down a little. So I'm just going to push them both inside, and I'm just going to hold that for a second. And I'm just going to line it up, move it around a little bit. Elmer's glue is very forgiving, so it makes that easy to line that up. So I'm just going to, since it's such a small board, it's hard to see the overlap, so I'm just going to feel with my finger and make sure I have that nice and tight in there. Let's hold that together with the tape. Now, there's two ways we can do this. Since I'm covering this with this red paper, and it's relatively thick, I don't really have to remove this tape. Like you've seen in class, sometimes I'll tape things together, let it dry, and then when I'm done, I remove the tape so I have a nice clean surface. Here, we can just leave it, and that's actually a common practice that they do when they make these. They'll tape corners up, and they leave the tape on there as long as it's thin enough and your wrapping paper is thick enough to cover so you don't see like a bump or anything there. So I'm just going to leave that right on there when we do that. So let's just let that set for a while. And the next step is I'm going to also provide this die line, which is going to be the paper that wraps around this box. We're going to glue our box right to the center. I have the dotted lines for all the folds. And then we're going to wrap this up and wrap the corner with these other pieces here. So again, I will provide this die line and the red paper. So all we have, and I'll have it already mounted with the repositionable spray mount, so we can get that on there nice and clean. So that'll be all given to you. So all we have to do is cut out around the outline, and then of course cut these tabs. These tabs are cut, and then the dotted lines, we're going to just score them. Now this is a similar kind of tool that I used for corrugation. I have this, it's like a big nail basically with a metal point on it. And then we can also use what's called an awl. This is a woodworking tool, and it's used for setting centers for doing screws and things like that and drilling holes. So all we need to do is I want to take all this white paper off, but I want to transfer this line work, these dotted lines, to the red paper, so when I peel it off I can see it, and those are going to be my folds. So I'm going to press gently. You can see I have a little dent right there. I'm going to press on that so I can see those folds. So I'm going to do that with this awl, just on my dotted lines. Now I'm leaning back and I'm just pressing to create a dent. I'm not digging and tearing. I just want to make a nice little dent there so I can see where that fold is. So we don't want to press too hard, but enough so we can see that. And that'll be the guide we can use to fold this around the box. Now I've done this a couple of different ways. I'm going to do this with the Elmer's glue. We can also do it with double stick, a twin tack. I think they might call it, at Blick, they might call it double mount or something like that. Basically it's just a big sheet of material. It's like a huge piece of tape, and you can cut it down into the different parts. But I'm going to do this with the wet glue this time. The big decision between using the twin tack and the wet glue is how thick the paper is. I've done some wrapping with very thin paper, and it kind of wrinkles and buckles up, and it's not great. So this is pretty thick. This is a nice robust paper. And these are really good because this is red material. It's homogeneous. It's red all the way through. It doesn't have a white backing on it. So when we wrap it and put our corners on there, it's all nice and red. So this is really good material. Again, they have a whole series of different colors, and some of them have patterns. In Casebound, they usually pre-print or pre-emboss, and it could even be fabrics, linens and cottons and things like that, that they wrap around these boxes. Same process, but I'm just using a piece of paper to make this demonstration. So I'm just going to make sure I have all my folds done, and this should come right off because I have the double stick. Okay, so that's my wrapping material, all ready to go. So what I would do now is make sure my folds are pretty clear, so I know where they are. So I'm going to do all the folds. Okay, so now we're going to glue, and we're going to glue each part separately. I'm going to do one at a time. Sometimes when I've done the twin tack, I have put the twin tack on the entire red part on the back and peeled it off. So then everything is activated. It's all very, very sticky, and it's a little hard to keep track of what you're doing, and you don't want it to stick to other parts. So the good part about the Elmers is you can do a little bit at a time. Each one you can fold up separately and cut them and bring them around. I've done twin tack where I actually put separate panels on each one of these and peel them off individually. That's a bit cumbersome to do. So they're all good, and we have to experiment and find out which ones really work for us. So with wet glue, I always have like little paper towel sections because I'm just going to rub this on with my finger. I'm going to do each panel separately. And I'm going to distribute some of the glue, but then I'm going to spread it out so it's as even as possible. Because this is moisture, and as it dries, the red paper starts to buckle a little. So we kind of have to learn, how much glue do we want to put on here so the evaporation process doesn't damage the paper too much. So I have just enough glue so I can get like 100% coverage on here all the way to the edge so it's nice and clean. And I always make sure I wipe that off because I don't want to get it all over this red material. I want to keep that really nice. So now I'm going to follow my folds and drop this down in here as perfectly as I can. Oops, let's move the camera. Okay, check it from a couple of different angles. Okay, press that into position. So that works pretty well. If I had too much glue, it would probably start buckling right now, but look, that looks really, really clean. So I'm just going to push on these edges, and that looks good. That looks great. So there is a priority here, so I'm going to glue this up first and then fold these over. I'm going to check. Now I have a little bit of overlap here, so I'm going to fix that and move that around. Now the reason I made these so large is sometimes you can see them. That's one way of checking how a box is made. You can see I have I don't know if you can see it, but there's like a little step right here, like a little bump. It's very subtle, but that's that tab coming around, and it was short. So when you glue over that, just that little thickness of material with the wet glue, you see a little step there. That's very typical. I'm going to try to disguise that by making my flaps come all the way to the center. But even if they don't line up perfectly, we still might see a little seam there. But I'm going to try. It's nice and it's beautiful and it's nice and clean. So I see I have a little bit of overlap. So I am going to take a chance, and I'm just going to try to trim that back slightly on each side. And let's see if I can estimate that lining up. So it's a little bit per side. So by doing that, I should be able to get those to line flat. I think I deliberately made them a little big. It's always a good idea to go a little bigger because you can always remove material. Very hard to add it back in. So let's see how that's going to work. Oops, this didn't come off. Okay, so not bad. So there might be a little bit of a space there, but it's pretty close. Let's see how that works. Okay, but the next step is we need to bring up these panels first, and then we're going to bring those around. So I'm going to do, actually I probably could do all this in one shot. And I'm going to try to do that. One shot being I was going to put the glue on all three of these panels and spread it out. This time I'm going to put it right on the red and then distribute that as much as I can. It was a good idea to try to get 100% distribution. possible. So I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to try to line everything as much as possible. I'm going to bring this around the corner. Pull that in tight. So when you do get a little buckling, which means the moisture in there is making the paper expand slightly, most of that will go away as it dries because the moisture is making it expand, and then as the moisture dries, it'll contract again and go back to its regular size. So I'm just going to watch it here for a moment, keep that as clean as I can. That looks good. This should move down a little. It's sitting a little high right here. I have that sticking up. I might want to trim that down. I didn't push. Let's see if I can move that down a little. No, I'll clean that out later. That looks good. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. So with hand making, it's kind of like a woodworking process. So as you go, you make little adjustments, and that's okay. So this is going to come around and cover that all up, and we're going to have a nice clean edge. That's why it's great to use these types of papers where there's no backing. It's red all the way through. So when you cut the edge and you glue that in really nice, you get a beautiful little corner that'll look very nice. So all this is lining up really well. It's good. Now since I did have okay, so each one of these, as you can see, when I come around, I have a little bit of extra material here. So we need to back off on that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cut a tiny little 45 degree, look at this light over here, a little 45 degree right in here, and then cut about 60 thousandths of material away. It's a small amount. And I'm going to use the inside box as a guide. And then I want to make sure I cut about a 45. So I have that nice little cut there. So as this goes in, it's coming around half that corner, and then I will do the same thing on this side. Sometimes we can leave a little bit more material on one side and have it overlap, but we've got to make sure it doesn't stick up too far. These are the subtle little details that make those corners really nice. Now this one I did kind of quickly, so you can see I didn't do it as well as it could have been. There's a little bit of black coming through there. You can see that, and my alignment inside isn't great. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Now, since I'm left-handed, I'm going to try to do this just a little bit of that material being held down. Here we go. That should do it. Okay. Alright, so that looks pretty good. So the idea is we're going to fold that in and glue that down. And now I have a little bit too much material. I want to make that as clean as possible. So let me get my pencil. And let's, well, that's fitting in there really tight. It's good. So these are all slightly long. So I think I'm going to actually measure that to make sure I get that correct. So it looks like I have a little less than 1.5. Oops. Okay. So I'm going to have to do this on all 4 panels, but I'm going to do one and see how accurate that is. And there it is. That's very nice. Just a little bit above the corner, which is great. That should work out really well. Okay, so then it'll be the same process here. We'll put some glue. I actually want to get it right on that top edge, and just to spread that out. Like so. Get that all the way to the edge so it doesn't curl up. Okay, and then make sure we roll that in really nice and tight like this. Press it on that top edge, and go like this. Push down inside there. So that's a really nice rolled edge right there for case bound. That came out really nice. So the idea is to get all these to line up, and that can be a little challenging. So it'll be the same thing over. So quite often in a case bound box or a wrapped box, you'll see these inner flaps only come in partially, like only just around the corner. That's pretty typical because it's a little easier to make. They use some jigs and fixtures and things to push those in. Doing it by hand, I like to bring it all the way down, right down to the corner. Just think it looks a little cleaner. But in production, that's a little bit more challenging to do. So then the last part to do is to bring these other two pieces in, and it's going to be the same situation. We'll calibrate this one in the depth and see if I can get that more accurate. I'm going to pull this in here. Sure I got to clean up the triangle from that glue as much as possible. Let's see. So that went a little deep. Let's see if I can, looks like I can leave this and not trim the bottom. Interesting. Okay. Let's see if I can get this out again. There we go. Alright, and then this is the last step. Okay, almost perfect. There's a couple of little nuances that aren't great. It'll be good to show examples of why considering some of these things is beneficial. I'm just going to push that out a little bit. That's bowing slightly because of the moisture. But that's not bad. Okay, looks good. So this situation, see all my corners look good. I would just make believe I like the black on the inside, or maybe there's an insert, another part that goes in here. So this might not even be significant. Could be a vacuum form, a little pulp structure, or another structure that supports it, that sits in there. So that's good. So here, you can see that edge back there. I cut that a little bit too much, so it's not lining up at the bottom. And I have a little bit of a gap there because of that estimate. Now this is sitting really nice. That's not bad. A little bit of a gap in here. This corner is sitting really nice, and I have all my depths very accurate. And this edge is lining up really nicely. You can see how those little 45s, they kind of meet here in the corner. Just a little bit of material right there. So not bad. So that's pretty good for 60 thousandths board. Okay, so that'll be our exercise for Monday's class. I will provide all the materials, and I'll demonstrate this again in class. And if you have any questions, we can talk about that. So that's your basic case-bound rigid box structure wrapping technique.